Who was here yesterday? Did we have fun yesterday? It was a great day, wasn't it? Well, I can't tell you how excited I am about our next speaker. A man called Nigel. He's a successful businessman. Obviously, most of you know his political background. He's the leader of the Brexit Party, a party that was only established a couple of months ago. It's leading in all the polling in England. They smashed it in the European elections. He is Nigel Farage. He's the leader of the Brexit Party, and he quite possibly could be the next Prime Minister of England. Ladies and gentlemen, Nigel Farage.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. How are we? Let's be happy. Thank you. Well, I got to say, that's pretty good for 9 o'clock in the morning. Well done. Good morning. I got to tell you, I love CPAC. I've been going to Maryland for the last few years to these amazing, enthusiastic, exciting conferences. And I've watched it grow and grow. I've watched the audience in America get younger and younger. And perhaps the greatest compliment anybody's ever paid to CPAC is the fact that President Trump now comes and speaks at CPAC every single year. Isn't that tremendous? And so I'm delighted to have been asked to come all the way down here to speak at the inaugural event. And I suppose what I have to begin by saying, and it hurts, it's difficult, it grates, it sticks in the throat, but well done, Australia, in the first Test match. The fact that Steve Smith has a somewhat dubious record as a sportsman. And the guy hasn't got that much guts because he keeps getting out just below 150. Have you noticed? No, I have to say, that was amazing. And I will be next Wednesday morning at Lord's to watch the second Ashes Test match. I'll be there. In a way, I guess this extraordinary rivalry, but indeed friendship that we have between our two nations is an extraordinary thing. It is a very wonderful thing. And one of the things that I have wanted, craved, fought for now over a quarter of a century is for my country to be independent, free, democratic, self-governing, not run by Mr. Juncker. Although I like Juncker. No, I do. I like Mr. Juncker. He's the only person I know that makes me feel I haven't got a drink problem. So I mean, there's having a glass of wine at lunch and crikey. But one of the reasons I want the UK to be free is I want us to re-engage with our real friends in the world, and Australia are right up at the top of my personal list. So let's get Brexit done. You know, it's been a remarkable 3 years. Who would have believed in the summer of 2016 that these extraordinary things would have happened? Who would have believed that Brexit could have happened? You know, the whole world, every global leader lining up, every giant multinational business lining up, even the American president at the time visiting our country. Really good to see the back of President Obama, I have to say. But everybody lining up and telling us that if we dared to vote for Brexit, investment would crash, property prices would disappear, we'd all become unemployed, plagues of black locusts would descend on our land. But it didn't matter. We voted Brexit. And then a few months later, in America, despite the fact that on that very morning, the Huffington Post said that Hillary, the blessed Hillary, had a 98.1% chance of winning. And yet what happened? The Donald swept to victory. Who'd have believed that? And who would have believed that in Italy, two political parties who just a decade ago barely troubled the scorer in general elections would between them get 50% of the vote in Italy, form a new government. And you may have heard yesterday that Matteo Salvini is calling for fresh elections. And his party, in what, remember, is a multi-party system operated under proportional representation, and that right now Salvini's Lega are on 39% of the vote in Italy. Isn't that an amazing change in a few years? And then perhaps one of the biggest shocks of all was the general election in Australia. Which seemed impossible. I thought that the Greenies had taken over this country. I thought that certainly when I went to Melbourne last September, and I couldn't believe it. Just for little me, 600 protesters. I mean, and CPAC really must buck their ideas up. I'm told that only 200 protesters are expected today. You really must do better than that next year. So these remarkable things have happened. These remarkable victories have happened for generally conservative-minded movements. And I want to just analyze a little bit why this has happened. And it's happened, I think, for one primary reason, and that is that there has been a revolt on the right. A revolt on the right, a revolt that has taken place in two ways. One, that existing parties themselves have either changed, adapted, recognized that actually there are different thoughts and feelings in the middle of their countries that exist at the center of their capital cities, and that's a very common theme right across the world. Or there have been new political movements. And this has all happened because what purported to be conservative parties and those who made themselves out to be conservative leaders actually were nothing of the kind. We had a bloke called David Cameron. You might have forgotten about him. He is pretty easily forgettable. He's the guy that thought, oh my God, this bloody Farage bloke, we can't be doing with this. I know what we'll do. We'll promise a referendum, and then if we have to deliver it, well, it's okay, we'll win anyway. Yeah, well, there we are. So I suspect that he and Samantha stick pins in my effigy every night before they go to bed. But we had David Cameron running the British Conservative Party, somebody who was not conservative in any way at all. You know, a part of the trendy metro liberal elite, masquerading as a conservative, being quite the opposite. The response to that was the rise, remarkable rise of UKIP. And when we thought the job had been done and a series of promises were made, and I'll come back to this later, of course, under Mrs. May, somebody else who pretended to be conservative but wasn't conservative in any way at all, well, we saw this year the remarkable establishment and rise of the Brexit Party. So that was one way in which the revolt on the right has manifested itself. And I have been very much a part of that revolt on the right. In fact, according to The Guardian, I am revolting. And much the same in America, where the Republican Party, again, had become barely recognizable as being a conservative party. The Mitt Romney challenge, if you remember, against Obama, when really on the big issues, the two had become pretty indistinguishable from each other. And what we saw there was not the growth of a new political movement, but we saw Donald Trump, through the primaries, in his own extraordinary individualistic way. I think low energy Jeb will live with him for the rest of his life. But we saw, I mean, it is great stuff, isn't it? You've got to say, it is great stuff. I mean, it really is. I mean, watching Trump, it's guinea a minute, it really is. And we saw Trump hijack the party. And of course, here in Australia, your Liberal Party, your Conservative movement, that had been hijacked by the other side, taken over by a bloke called Malcolm Turnbull, who pretended to be a conservative, but actually turned out to be a snake. And I can't think of any other word to describe the man, but hey, he was gone. You got somebody who was conservative, and guess what? Mainstream media may not like it. Those in the middle of Melbourne and Sydney may not like it, but out in where real people live, they voted for him and he won it. So there's been this revolt on the right that has happened, and we now are going, generally, across the Western world, we're going for leaders that have got personality, which after some of the insipids that have been around for the last 20 years is good. We're going for leaders that have got policies, that have got ideas, and we're going for political parties that believe in the basic tenets that the nation state in the world is the building block to whom we pay our allegiance, our taxes, our loyalty, and it's through it's through the nation that we want to live our lives, not through the new, false, bureaucratic, globalist movement. That is why the revolt on the right has happened. And what is fascinating about this, and I think in many ways very encouraging, is the response that we've seen from the other side. They call it in America the Trump derangement syndrome, where they literally cannot hide their hatred and contempt for the fact that those with different points of view are now in the ascendancy. You see, they'd had it all their own way, haven't they? They'd had it all their own way. They'd managed to drive the Conservative parties all towards the social democratic centre. They thought they'd established the new order of global politics, and they're shocked, and it's much the same in every country. The left, in response to what has happened, the left have now become more and more extreme. Green is the new red. Green is the new socialism. Green is the new Marxism. Now, they've been aided and abetted in this by our educational establishments, be it through schools, colleges, or universities. I actually think it's irresponsible and wrong to tell our teenagers that in 12 years the world is going to end if we continue driving Range Rovers. I think it is perfectly reasonable and right to tell young people that there are issues like deforestation. There are issues like plastics in our oceans. There are real, serious global issues facing us as mankind, and we're going to have to work together across the world to do our best to deal with them. But to teach our young people that because of carbon dioxide, which has now been decided is the new evil, that all civilization is going to end, and that therefore it's quite acceptable to break all the norms of democratic behavior whether it's blockading airports or sitting down in the streets of London. And this has now become almost a new religion that has been picked up by many of our young people, and it's manifested itself in politics. So it is the Greens that have really taken over the left of politics. But there's something else going on out there that is worthy of consideration. You see, for civilized democracy to operate and function, you have to have the loser's consent. The loser says, I'm not happy with the result of this election, but I accept it. Because that is how our system works. And I vow, in 4 or 5 years' time, to work damned hard to make sure that my side wins the next round. That is what we're all used to. And yet, since 2016, this has not been happening. Since 2016, in America, there has been a complete refusal to accept that Trump won the election fair and square. It's why the American people have been put through the agony of Mueller. And even when the Mueller report says there's no collusion, they still won't accept that, and they keep on going. Of course, much the same has happened in the United Kingdom, where clearly it wasn't possible for Brexit to have happened. There must have been a reason that Brexit happened. Oh, I know, it must be the Russians. Must be the Russians what done it. And it's all led to these bizarre conspiracy theories that somehow I was at the center of this international web, that I was running memory sticks. Oh yeah. If you don't know this, you're not reading the right newspapers, I've got to tell you. That I was running memory sticks straight from Trump into President Assange. That I was the one person at the center of this international conspiracy. I mean, I started to read this stuff. I just couldn't believe it. I said to a friend of mine one Sunday morning, I looked at the Observer, I said, well, what on earth am I going to do? I mean, they're saying that I'm literally the link between the Kremlin and the Trump campaign. With Brexit chucked in the middle for good measure, you know. I said, what am I going to do? He said, for God's sake, don't tell them it's wrong. They think you're really important now, you know. So first it was the Russians, but that hasn't gone anywhere. The next theory was, it turned out in the referendum that I'd had a couple of meetings with a guy called Paul McKenna. Paul McKenna is a famous TV hypnotist in Britain. So the next theory was that I'd hypnotized the nation and made them all go and vote Brexit against their will. And of course, the persistent one is that we lied. That's the persistent one. Brexit only happened because we lied in the campaign. As if no politician in any election ever in history has not perhaps over-embroidered their side of the argument in order to get votes. And so it is extraordinary that they simply don't accept the result. They won't accept the result. We now have the leader, a new leader in Britain of the Liberal Democrats. No, wait for it. Wait for it. Save the best till last, all right? So we have a new leader of the Liberal Democrats in the United Kingdom, and she says that even if there is a second referendum, and the second referendum votes for Brexit, she still won't accept the result. Quite how that is ever seen to be liberal or democratic is completely and utterly beyond me, but it in a way typifies, doesn't it, what I'm talking about? It typifies that there is this new left, and it is fundamentally anti-democratic. democratic by its very nature. And it says to us that we have to recognize that just because we win an election or we win a referendum, that of itself is not enough. Our battle for democracy, our battle for liberty, our battle for free speech is a perpetual battle against the bad forces that human beings will always unleash. We can't just win once. We have to go on winning again and again and again and resolve ourselves to do so. Now, I thought I'd won because my great battle, and it started back in the early 1990s, is I resolved that it was quite wrong for the United Kingdom to be tied up into a political union based in Brussels, run by unelected bureaucrats, that was going to reduce my country to being not much more than a province of a foreign state. I came to that point of view in about 1990. And I realized that whilst there were people in the British Labour Party, there were people in the British Conservative Party who shared this view in private, none of them really ever would express this view in public. It was all too difficult because there was an established status quo that said the future of our country was as part of this new European bloc. So I decided, the hell with it, I'm going to fight against it. And so I did, standing in election after election, going on for year after year after year, until I made a bit of a breakthrough in 1999 when I got elected to the European Parliament. That gave me, the first ever potential media space in Britain, although media space in Britain with the BBC is not necessarily all that it's cracked up to be, believe me. But I got that first platform back in 1999, and I just kept on relentlessly plugging away for us to be an independent nation. And when in 2016 we won the referendum, we were told by the Conservative government they would honour the result. We had a Prime Minister who promised us she would deliver on the result. She held an election the next year promising to deliver on the result. The opposition party, the Labour Party, under Jeremy Corbyn. Well, I wouldn't boo. We should be thrilled. What, the fact that the British Labour Party is run by a Marxist anti-Semite who is wholly unelectable should be good news, not bad news. But honestly, I thought, that's it. We've done it. We're leaving the European Union. I've achieved my life's goal. My political goal wasn't ever to fight for rank or position. It was to achieve real, fundamental, historical change in the United Kingdom, and I thought we'd done it. And this goes back to my earlier comment that I've now realized winning once for our side of the argument is not enough. Hands up, I got it wrong. I got it wrong because I trusted the very establishment who betrayed us in the first place to do the right thing. So I eased off out of politics, gave up the leadership of UKIP, did other things, saw out my time, I thought, in the European Parliament, and decided I'd spend a bit more time devoting myself to my hobbies. I visited more pubs over the course of the last... But then, earlier this year, it became apparent in January, February, and into March, it became apparent that all the promises that we would leave on March the 29th And Theresa May told us 108 times we would leave on March the 29th. It became apparent to me that this simply wasn't going to happen. And I resolved that once again, I would have to try and do something about it. And I think the response to what I did is something that should fill all of us with tremendous hope. I set up the Brexit Party. I launched it on the 12th of April. And within 6 weeks, we'd won a national election, getting 50% more votes than the party that came second. It was a truly remarkable response. And the result of it in the ensuing weeks, well, within 24 hours of the election, something really good happened. Mrs. May resigned as Prime Minister. And I suspect if I hadn't set the Brexit Party up, she'd still be there. She'd still be there, and the agony of 3 wasted years would be continuing. And then for the next couple of weeks, the Brexit Party was topping the national opinion polls for the next general election. And I think that Boris, who is a very entertaining, amusing, outgoing character, and it's a good thing for him that we live in more socially relaxed times than the past. It's all right, no one's perfect. I'm looking at you. No, Boris is a great character, and it was a great thing that Boris joined the Brexit campaign when he did. It was very important. No one knew whether Boris would back Brexit or not, but at the last minute he came on board, and he was a very, very important part of that referendum campaign. I haven't wholly trusted him, because when Mrs. May came back from Brussels with that miserable new treaty that would have kept us tied, Boris told us that it would lead to us being a vassal state, a slave state. And twice he voted against the treaty, and on the third time of asking, he voted for the treaty. So Boris may not be 100% nailed on to full independence for the United Kingdom, but there is a new political reality. What the Brexit Party have done is to completely reset the political agenda in Britain. The Conservative government now know that if we don't leave on the 31st of October, they, as a political party, are finished, and the ghastly spectre who's standing in front of you now will probably win the next general election. So Boris, no. So I will say to Boris and the Conservatives, deliver or die. It's just as simple as that. I promised, if I had to come back into frontline politics, that next time it'd be no more Mr. Nice Guy, and I mean it, all right? So let's just remind ourselves, the other side, the globalists, work together. They operate together. They in many ways are co-funded. They have been working together for decades to achieve a new global governance in our world. We, on our side, in the generally conservative, nationalist or nationalist movements, have tended to operate very much on our own. And that now needs to change. We now need to start working together. We now need to start recognizing that because we want to put the interests of our nation and its citizens first, does not in any way deter us or stop us or hinder us from cooperating on the international stage. We need to show the world that we're keen to work with each other. And that's why I welcome this CPAC event here in Sydney. That's why I'm going to go on, whatever I do, working with other groups around the world dedicated to nation-state democracy, dedicated to those principles of liberty and freedom, but dedicated also in working together and sharing many other things. I have a huge belief, and not one that is based on romanticism, but I have a great belief that the English-speaking peoples of the world have an extraordinary and remarkable bond between them. If I look at the Commonwealth, and I add in America, there's something like 2.7 billion people living in those countries. I think my country has a great future, working, trading, cooperating, sharing information with those nations. I wish no ill to Europe or the European nations at all, but I think I know where our true friends in the world are, and they're in countries like this, and I want to thank you very much indeed this morning for having me here as your guest. Thank you. I've left about 15 minutes ago. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Nigel has graciously agreed to take some questions. But before we take questions, I just want to explain, we do have one rule at CPAC. We do not hide statements inside questions. So if you put your hands up, and obviously not everyone's going to get a chance to get their questions, but we'll take them starting over here. There are microphones around as well, so if you could use that.
Nigel, thank you. Nigel, some of us booked late for this conference and were unable to get dinner tickets and lunch tickets through no fault of our own. It's very popular, as you can see. Would you be prepared to have a few pints with me and some of my friends at a bar of your choosing?
You know the answer to that question before you even asked it, didn't you? Of course, if I can, I will. But the trouble is, they've got me on a very tight rein here, and I've got to be. I'm doing a panel discussion later on this evening. I'm sorry if you couldn't get tickets. All I can say is, it's quite a testament, isn't it, to a brand new event that it's packed to the rafters, and I can't speak for Matt and Dan and the others. I can't speak for them, but I'm pretty confident that next year there'll be a CPAC event back here in Australia, and it'll be 5 times the size that it is this year, and you'll know about it early.
Nigel, thanks for coming out of retirement after your fantastic "You're Not Laughing Now" speech at the EU. One of the things about Brexit, and acknowledging it's about political sovereignty and legal status, but it was also about, a number of people in Britain said it was about reducing immigration. And given David Cameron, what did he say it was about? He was going to reduce it from 250,000. It actually went up on his watch. Yeah. Hasn't Brexit become like this distraction from actually reducing immigration, which is what a lot of British people wanted?
Well, look, I mean, we had operated an immigration policy from the late 1940s right until Tony Blair got in the late 1990s, where through that 50, 60-year period, net migration into the United Kingdom averaged 30,000 a year. That was the mean average over that long period of time. Sometimes as high as 50,000, other years down as low as 10,000. But I think we can say that at the turn of a century, of all the European nations, the one that had dealt with immigration the best, the one that had the highest level of integration, the one that had the fewest levels of tension, be it religious or be it racial, was the United Kingdom compared to France, Italy, and any other European country. We then had Blair, who opened up the doors unconditionally, not just to Europe, but indeed to much of the rest of the world. And we saw official net migration go up to 1/3 10 times what it had been for that period. So yes, the Brexit vote was the Brexit vote was a subset of being in control of your life. Because the British passport, the first two words on it now are European Union. And that passport effectively is not just for the 65 million Britons, it's for the 500 million people living in the European Union. So yes, nobody had campaigned harder than me on getting immigration back to sensible levels, to having immigration where you have the right people, and you don't favour people from Bulgaria over Australia or India. You choose the right people who've got the right skills, who will integrate with your society, and you do so with a responsible number. You'd have thought, with the response to me making these arguments, that I was some sort of devil, some sort of extreme far-right figure that had come and taken over the country. But it was an argument that resonated and an argument that works. Boris Johnson, on this issue, could not be weaker. He already is proposing an amnesty for 500,000 illegal immigrants living in the United Kingdom. And I suspect the immigration numbers under Prime Minister Boris Johnson will continue to go up, not come down. But you're right, Cameron, Boris won't promise to reduce numbers, all right? That's what I'll give him that. He won't promise to. But 3 Conservative manifestos in a row said we will reduce net migration to tens of thousands every year. They never even intended to do it. And that's what our politics have become. The cynicism of politics, where parties promise things at elections without ever intending to deliver them. 2 final points. 1, this issue will come back to be a major issue in British politics. Of course it will. And secondly, isn't it refreshing to see an American president who made a series of promises to the electorate and one by one is ticking off the list? Isn't that marvellous? Where are we?
Microphone.
Nigel, I was horrified when Theresa May committed the UK to the Global Compact on migration. I just wondered, could you have a few words about that and whether you think there's any chance of the UK withdrawing from the compact?
Look, this is where we are, isn't it? One of the, this whole, if you think about everything that is happening in our politics, it is this debate of globalism versus nationalism. All right? And the globalists want free movement of people. The globalists think we're all citizens of the world, not understanding that actually integration within society is what leads to people living comfortable, relaxed lives. Whereas the argument for nation states, and it's back to the previous question, is that we control immigration numbers sensibly. We're not anti-immigration or anti-immigrant at all. We just believe in having the right degree of control. Theresa May, as I said earlier, Theresa May was never a conservative. Cameron was never a conservative. Malcolm Turnbull was never a conservative. These aren't conservatives. They're people who've used the conservative label to further their own political careers whilst in office doing the opposite. Now, I was horrified when she signed up to that global compact. I want to see a Conservative government get out of it, but I fear that Boris Johnson on this issue is himself too politically correct, too metropolitan to do so. But you know what? In the short term, I'll forgive him that if in 82 days' time, at 11 p.m. on the 31st of October, we leave the European Union, and then, sir, I will have a few pints. Don't worry about that.
Good morning. As you can hear from my accent, I am from Scotland. I've lived in the States and I'm living here and I've worked in different countries. Can I ask you 3 points? 1, a lot of people discuss here the Irish question. 2, we see that Mrs. Sturgeon, Nicola, and Mr. Socialist from the Labour, I've forgotten his name now.
Corbyn.
or hand in hand the other day.
Yeah.
I'm wondering what your opinion is. And also, can I ask you one thing as the next Londoner, what the hell is going on in London every day? The stabbings, and the police seem to be either not enough or not there.
Well, in reverse order, London has Sadiq Khan as mayor. And I tell you what's amazing. Is with a rocketing murder rate, that the mayor of London, the last time I checked, had not visited a single crime site or spoken to a single bereaved family. That isn't leadership. That is completely giving up in the face of growing gang and knife violence. And maybe what we need to do is to get somebody like Rudy Giuliani as mayor of London, you know, who actually proved that being a hands-on mayor, caring about stuff, understanding crime scenes and why things happen, backing it up with robust policing, and my God, didn't he turn New York around? You know, I mean, remarkable achievement. So, yeah, the whole thing in London is really, I think, under Khan, an absolute disgrace. Ireland, look, if we discuss the Irish question, we'd be here forever. It has been for centuries the great bone of contention in British politics. All I can say to you is this. Today, across the Irish border, and most of that border between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, most of it goes through fields, all right? And on one side of the border to the other, you've got different income tax rates, different excise duties, different corporation tax rates, God knows, even a different currency. And yet, on the basis of live and let live, life goes on. Once Britain leaves the European Union, with or without tariff, life will still go on. Monsieur Barnier, the very clever chief negotiator for Brussels, and I saw Barnier in a coffee bar in April of this year, and we exchanged pleasantries. Well, I've been pretty constructive over the years there in my speeches, haven't I? But I said to Barnier, I said, I tell you, mate, I said, I wish you were on our side because you're a much better negotiator than we are. And he got May. I mean, this is the truth of it, right? And I'm out of time, but this is the truth of it. Barnier had set Mrs. May a deadline on the 8th of December 2017. And a British Prime Minister left Downing Street at 4:15 in the morning to fly to Brussels to meet a deadline imposed by an unelected French bureaucrat. I mean, what have we sunk to as a country when our Prime Minister even does this? And it was there that she signed up to the principle of the Irish backstop, and everything since then has been lost. Boris, don't revisit that dreadful treaty. Don't revisit the deal. If you do, I'll fight you every inch of the way. The only way out of this is for a clean break. And if he goes in that direction, then yes, sure. The SNP, the Greens, the Liberal Democrats, other nationalists, Plaid Cymru, you name it, and maybe even Corbyn, they will form an alliance to stop Brexit from happening. But the more they do that, the more they will alienate themselves from Middle England. Believe me on this, whether it happens on the 31st of October this year, or whether it takes a little bit longer, Brexit is going to happen, all right?
We have time for one more question, just down the front here.
Thank you for being here, Nigel. Now, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but if you were ever Prime Minister one day, what would be your priorities, Brexit aside?
Well, I think Brexit aside, I think Britain's role in the world. We've kind of forgotten who we are. We have, I mean, even when it comes to foreign policy, I mean, give an example. We've got this standoff with Iran at the moment in the Gulf. We've got one of their ships in Gibraltar, and they've got one of our ships. And the Foreign Secretary, as he was then, Jeremy Hunt, said no more British ships would go through the Straits of Hormuz until a European naval protection force could be put in place. That shows you we've lost our way. We don't understand who we are in terms of foreign policy. We don't get who we are in terms of defence. And so I think a complete rebalancing of where the United Kingdom is in the world in terms of its alliances, its relationships, and that brings me back in a way to the English-speaking peoples of the world, those who operate on a common law system, those with whom we have shared social and historical interests. And internally in Britain, well, I think one of the biggest problems in Britain that we have is a growing inequality. And I say that because the 7% in the United Kingdom who are fortunate enough to go through the private education system now have advantages in terms of careers in media, politics. Gosh, even the England cricket team, the one that's going to beat you at Lord's next Wednesday. I tell you what, I'm not betting on it, I've got to tell you. Not unless Steve Smith falls down a flight of stairs, because I think he could be the next Bradman. He's that good, guys. He is that good. He's scarily good. Even our cricket team, even nearly all of our cricket team went to that 7% of schools. And I look at big cities like Liverpool, who now, every year, from the whole city, send fewer than a handful of kids to Oxford and Cambridge. And I think, are they all stupid in Liverpool? I don't think so. They're not being given opportunity. And things have gone really bad with our state education system. We've encouraged so many of our youngsters to go to university when actually academically they probably shouldn't be going. We've discouraged young people from getting skills like engineering or whatever else it may be. I think we've betrayed the young people of Britain, and I want to reinvest in the youth of our nation through the education system. That for me will be a major, major step.
Ladies and gentlemen, please thank Nigel Farage.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Great. Really enjoyed it.